They say dogs can sense evil, that they can see what humans can't smell, what's been scrubbed away, hear what's whispered behind locked doors. But no one at Memorial Hope Hospital was prepared when Radar A, retired K9 German Shepherd with a silver streak down his back, growled at one of their most beloved doctors. It wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. It happened on a Tuesday morning, sunny, harmless like any other day. But sometimes the darkest truths hide in the light. Radar's handler, Officer Lena Brooks, had been volunteering at the hospital for nearly 2 months, walking the halls with Radar to comfort patients in the geriatric and rehab wards. The hospital loved him. Staff slipped him treats. Elderly patients smiled when he padded into the room, tail gently wagging. To most, Radar was just a sweet therapy dog in retirement. But Lena knew better. Radar wasn't just a dog. He had worked homicide, missing persons, and search and rescue in disasters from Kentucky to Kansas. He'd found bodies under collapsed homes. Once he uncovered a murder weapon buried under snow after the Fargo blizzard of 2016. When Radar growled, it wasn't confusion, it was instinct. And that day he growled at Dr. Charles Bennett. The hallway outside radiology was quiet except for the squeak of cartwheels and the gentle beep of machines. Dr. Bennett was coming around the corner, clipboard in hand-white coat, crisp hair, slick back. Mid-40s, polite, always made eye contact when he greeted people. But the moment Radar saw him, the dog froze. Ears perked, hackles raised. Then the growl, a deep, resonant sound from the chest. Lena hadn't heard it in years and never in this setting. Radar stepped in front of her, blocking her path, positioning himself between her and the doctor like it was a crime scene. Dr. Bennett blinked. "Whoa, hey there, buddy," he said, smiling with practiced calm. Radar's eyes narrowed. "Sorry, Doc," Lena said, tugging on the leash. "He doesn't usually do that." "Maybe it's the mask," Bennett chuckled, adjusting the light blue N95 over his mouth. "Dogs don't always like not seeing our faces." But Radar wasn't reacting to fabric, he was reacting to him. "Down, Radar," Lena said, her voice calm but firm. Radar obeyed reluctantly, but his eyes stayed locked on Bennett, and his body was still tense, coiled ready. As they walked on, nurses giggled behind her. One of them, April, called out, "Guess Radar's got strong opinions about bedside manner." Lena laughed politely, but her stomach twisted. She'd seen Radar growl like that only twice in his career. Both times it led to arrests. By noon, she couldn't shake the feeling. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind. Maybe Radar smelled another patient, maybe he was off, but no, Radar wasn't easily spooked. She took a break in the staff lounge and pulled up her laptop. Dr. Charles Bennett, Memorial Hope Hospital, search results loaded instantly. A few local newspaper articles, award ceremonies, hospital fundraisers, a quote about community health care. His profile on the hospital's website was thin. Graduated out west, previously worked in private practice. No photos older than 6 years ago. Lena narrowed her eyes. Something didn't add up. She typed into a separate browser, "How to verify medical license by name, U.S. database." Just as she clicked, and enter her phone buzzed. "Lena, you better come quick," said a voice she recognized, Nurse Helen. One of the veterans in the recovery wing. Radar's growling again. Same doctor, same hallway. Radar's second outburst was even stronger. This time he wouldn't let the doctor pass. He stood in front of him, teeth bared, not barking, not attacking, just warning. "I don't think I've done anything to offend your friend," Dr. Bennett said, looking down at Radar. His tone was dry, almost amused, but his hand gripped his clipboard a little too tight. "Maybe he smells something from outside," Lena said quickly. "Sorry again." But this time there were witnesses, 2 nurses and a patient in a wheelchair. One of them murmured, "That's weird," while the other took out her phone like she was about to record it. Radar didn't flinch. He kept staring. "If you believe in the bond between animals and truth, if you know, dogs can see through the masks we wear. Subscribe to Heroes for Animals. Here we share stories of real animals who saved lives, revealed lies, and stood between danger and the innocent." That evening, Lena pulled up every file she could find on Charles Bennett. She dug deeper than Google this time into old news archives, even the hospital staff newsletter. She also called in an old friend, Detective Frank Delaney, who owed her more than a few favors. "Hey, Frank," she said, "I need you to run a background check on someone. Name's Charles Bennett. Works at Memorial Hope. Been here 6 years. Something's off." "You mean you're asking me to run a full check on a doctor because your dog doesn't like him? He's not just a dog." And yes, Frank sighed, "Give me 24 hours. Back at the hospital the next day, Lena tried to act normal. Radar did too until they passed by Dr. Bennett's office. The dog stopped cold. Then he began sniffing the bottom corner of the office door, whining, then scratching. Lena looked around. No one was watching. She leaned in close and sniffed. Faint but there, disinfectant, bleach, and something else, like metal. "Come on," she whispered. "Not here." Radar gave one last huff before moving on. But Lena's nerves were shot. Her hands shook as she dialed Frank. When he answered, his voice was lower, serious. "You're not crazy," he said. Lena sat down in the hospital chapel pew. "What did you find?" "Charles Bennett died in a car fire outside Reno 6 years ago. Body burned beyond recognition, but dental confirmed. No foul play, supposedly. But the timing's weird. Same week, a surgeon named Lucas Darnell vanished while under federal investigation." She didn't breathe. "You're saying—" "I'm saying someone took Bennett's name and license. Darnell had the skills, and he had a reason to disappear." Lena ended the call and stared out the stained glass window. Radar lay beside her, head on his paws, eyes watchful. She whispered, "What the hell did you just uncover, boy?" He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because somewhere inside this hospital, the past wasn't buried. It was walking the halls, smiling, healing, killing. And Radar was the only one who saw the truth. Lena Brooks hadn't slept. Not really. She closed her eyes, sure, but her mind kept replaying Frank's words on a loop. Charles Bennett died in a car fire. The man you're seeing is likely Lucas Darnell. Lucas Darnell, a name that once made headlines in medical boards and criminal courts alike, accused of unauthorized surgeries, organ tampering, and obstruction of justice. A man who'd vanished before facing trial, a man presumed dead until now. And somehow he was walking the brightly lit halls of Memorial Hope Hospital, shaking hands, signing charts, and smiling behind his surgical mask. It was absurd, it was terrifying, and Radar had known it before anyone else. That morning, Lena poured herself black coffee in the department break room. Her hands trembling, Radar lay at her feet, alert, staring toward the hallway like he expected someone to charge in. Her phone buzzed. Frank Delaney again. "I dug deeper," he said, without greeting. "You're not gonna like it." Lena braced herself. "Let's hear it." Lucas Darnell was suspected of operating an illegal transplant network. A whistleblower nurse claimed he removed viable organs from at least 2 patients, both declared dead under suspicious circumstances. Jesus, he disappeared a week before the FBI raided his surgical unit. Fake ID found at his apartment, but no trace of him since. Until now. Lena whispered, "And he's been working here for 6 years. As Dr. Charles Bennett, yes, with a spotless reputation." Lena could feel her pulse quicken. "I need to prove it." Frank lowered his voice. "You need to be careful. If this guy knows the walls are closing in, he'll bolt. Or worse." She ended the call and looked down at Radar. He was already standing as if he'd been listening the whole time. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "Let's follow the scent." That afternoon, Lena told the volunteer coordinator she'd be walking a different route, with Radar checking in on new patients. Instead, she made her way to the record storage basement, a restricted area most people didn't even know existed unless they worked there long term. The place was cold, dusty, shelves full of patient charts, old surgical logs, and facility inspection reports. Lena flipped on the light and stepped in. Radar's nose immediately went to work. He moved carefully down the aisle of shelves, sniffing low, methodical, tail down. Then he stopped at a side door marked Maintenance Archives, 2018-2021. He whined once, then scratched. Lena's heart hammered. She looked around. No cameras, no one watching. She jiggled the knob, unlocked. The air behind the door was stagnant, laced with mildew and something faintly metallic. Inside, there were boxes, ordinary-looking, labeled with tape, electrical logs, elevator, maintenance plumbing, ICU wing. Radar moved to the far corner. A box sat slightly ajar, like it had been disturbed recently. Lena approached and lifted the lid. Inside were papers, old memos, and her breath caught a manila envelope unmarked. She opened it. Inside were several photocopies of federal wanted poster with a younger photo of Lucas Darnell, a police sketch, a news clipping from the Chicago Tribune: surgeon disappears ahead of organ trafficking trial. Notes in handwriting she didn't recognize. "He's here. New name, new license. Someone knows." Lena's mouth went dry. Someone at this hospital knew who he really was and kept it buried. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad, Radar lying nearby with his head on her foot. "Okay," she whispered, scribbling furiously. 2017, Lucas disappears. 2018, Charles Bennett is hired at Memorial Hope. 20. First flag patient death under Bennett's care, unexplained cardiac failure. 2021 security upgrade after data breach. Bennett starts avoiding main cameras. She circled one line. Why hide the envelope and maintenance records? Someone must have started piecing it together before her. But instead of going public, they hid the evidence. Or maybe they were silenced. Lena shuddered. The next day, Lena wore plain clothes, no police badge, just a visitor badge with her full name. She walked Radar into the supply wing under the pretense of checking in on post-op patients. But really, she was trying to get near Bennett's office. She passed by his hallway once. Radar tensed again. Even from a distance, the dog's ears perked and his body shifted. He locked eyes on the frosted glass of the door marked Dr. Charles Bennett, cardio unit. Lena paused briefly. A nurse came out of the side hall. Ms. Brooks, can I help you with something? Lena smiled. Just doing rounds. The nurse hesitated. You're not assigned to this wing. I got permission from Carrie switching routes today. The nurse seemed unsure but nodded and walked on. Lena moved on, heart pounding. Later that night, she took her suspicions to the chief nurse, Deborah King, a level-headed, no-nonsense woman who had worked at the hospital for 30 years. They met in the staff garden near the memorial fountain. I need to show you something, Lena said, handing her a printout of the FBI poster next to a recent photo of Bennett. Deborah frowned. Where did you get this? I have connections. Deborah studied the images, then looked up sharply. This is serious. I believe he's operating under a fake identity, and someone on staff already knew years ago. Deborah crossed her arms. Do you have proof he's done anything illegal while here? Not yet. But the way he avoids cameras, the way Radar reacted not once but 3 times, and now these files. Deborah said nothing for a long moment. Then if you're right, this could bury the hospital. I don't care about the hospital's image, Lena said. I care about who he's hurting next. The next morning, everything changed. A young intern named Cara Dean went missing from her post. She didn't check in for rounds, didn't answer her phone. Her car was still in the lot. Lena felt dread pull in her stomach. By noon, a hospital-wide alert was issued. Security started sweeping each floor. Radar was already tense, whining, and then he pulled free. He darted down the stairs toward the sub-basement level where unused rooms and labs had been stored since the 2003 renovation. Lena chased after him, heart racing. Radar, she called. What are you doing? He stopped outside a locked storage room and began barking frantic, sharp, insistent. A janitor passing by glanced over. No one's been down there in years. Lena demanded the keys. The janitor hesitated, then handed them over. She unlocked the door. The smell hit her first chloroform. Disinfectant. Metal. Fear. Cara Dean lay on the floor, barely conscious, arms bound and IV lines still taped to her wrist. Call security, Lena shouted, and get an ambulance. Radar stood over the girl, protectively growling softly toward the shadows. Hours later, after Cara was safe and recovering, hospital security reviewed the sub-basement cameras, what few still worked. A tall man in a white coat had led Cara into the stairwell the night before. He was careful to keep his face out of view. But Lena didn't need a full face. She saw the posture, the build, the slicked back hair. Dr. Bennett. But by the time the police arrived at his office, it was empty. The computer wiped, drawers cleared. Lucas Darnell had vanished again. Lena sat in the dark hospital chapel that night, Radar curled up beside her. She looked up at the stained glass. He almost got away with it again, she whispered. But not with you around, huh? Radar didn't respond, but his tail thumped once. She smiled. Then her phone buzzed. Frank again. We've got an APB out. But he's smart. He's got money, connections. I know, but now we got something better. We've got a witness. And your dog. Lena looked down at Radar, whose eyes met hers, calm, sharp, loyal. No one hides forever, she said. And this time Radar wasn't going to let the devil wear a doctor's coat ever again. 3 days had passed since Cara Dean was found in the sub-basement, groggy and terrified but alive. The hospital issued a brief press statement, something vague about a personnel concern and ongoing law enforcement cooperation. Most people shrugged it off, but not Lena, not Radar, and certainly not Cara Dean, whose whispered words in the ICU replayed in Lena's mind like a bad dream. It was him. It was Dr. Bennett. He said he needed my blood type. Then everything went black. Now the hospital was in chaos. Internal audits, temporary closures, staff walking on eggshells, patients requesting transfers. And somewhere out there, Lucas Darnell was on the move. The FBI believed he had a burner car parked blocks from the hospital. The footage from an ATM near 8th and Rowan showed a man in a gray hoodie and surgical mask, 6'1", same frame, same gait as Dr. Bennett, pulling out $400 cash and vanishing. Just like that, another ghost. But Lena wasn't giving up. She knew the man wasn't done. Not yet. His kind men who build lies brick by brick and then live inside them, they never stop building until the whole thing crashes. And this time she intended to be holding the hammer. She sat across from Kara's hospital bed now. Kara looked better, pale, sure, but awake, more herself. "Do you remember anything else?" Lena asked gently. Kara looked down at her blanket. His hands were shaking. "I think he was nervous. Or maybe excited." Lena frowned. "Did he say why he picked you?" Kara nodded slowly. "Blood type, AB negative." He said it out loud. "I didn't even know I was that rare." Lena's stomach turned. "Did he draw any blood?" "Yes, just before I blacked out. I think he was going to harvest something." Lena placed a hand on hers. "You're safe now. You saved a lot of lives, Kara. He won't get to do this again." Radar lying beside the bed gave a soft bark. Kara smiled weakly. "He found me, didn't he?" Lena nodded. "He always does." Later that afternoon, Lena met with Detective Frank Delaney again. They sat on a bench near the hospital loading dock out of view from the media vans parked along the main drive. Frank was holding a large folder FBI case files newly declassified. "You're not going to like this," he said, handing it over. Lena flipped through the first few pages. "What am I looking at?" Darnell's original investigation. Before he disappeared, he was connected to a private medical group out of Nevada. Real shadowy stuff, offshore donors, no oversight, and patients who disappeared after routine surgeries. She paused at one photo. It was of a young woman, mid-20s, blonde, blue eyes, labeled Isabel Jameson, presumed dead. She looked familiar. Lena stared at the face. Then it hit her. "She was a patient here," Lena whispered. "We had a Jane Doe 2 years ago. Same eyes. She was in a coma for weeks before she passed. Dr. Bennett handled the paperwork, said she was a trauma case." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You still got her records?" "I know where to look." Back inside the hospital's data archive, Lena and Radar returned to the records terminal. The database wasn't easy to navigate. It was a Frankenstein system of patched servers and half-digitized records. But Lena knew the tricks. She found it. Patient ID JD1172. Female. Unknown identity. Severe abdominal trauma. Arrived unconscious. No next of kin. Attending physician Dr. Charles Bennett. She scrolled further. Procedure ordered exploratory laparotomy. Result patient death during recovery. Nothing flagged. No notes about internal organ loss. But the digital scans showed something odd, no kidneys. Lena's blood ran cold. "She didn't arrive missing kidneys," she said aloud. "That happened here." Radar stood and growled softly, staring toward the hallway. That evening, Lena took the new evidence to Nurse Deborah King again. This time, Deborah didn't hesitate. "This needs to go to the state medical board immediately," she said. "And the FBI." "I already made a call to the bureau," Lena said. "But we need to assume he'll strike again. He's running out of time. He's desperate." "Why?" "Because Cara Dean is a living witness. And because I think he left something unfinished." Deborah frowned. "You mean another patient?" Lena nodded. "Or someone who knows too much." Radar confirmed it the next morning. Lena brought him to the East Wing, quite older, mostly used for physical therapy now. The halls smelled of antiseptic and eucalyptus lotion. But when they passed room 214, Radar froze. Then he scratched the door. Lena opened it cautiously. Inside, an elderly man sat in a wheelchair by the window, sun falling across his weathered face. A nurse's chart read, "Name Arthur Callahan, age 77, admitted 4 months ago, diagnosis stroke recovery." But Radar wasn't reacting to illness. He walked slowly to the man's side, sat down and looked up. Arthur opened his eyes. "Is that Radar?" he rasped. Lena froze. "Do you know this dog?" The man smiled faintly. "He was in the news, that search and rescue unit in Missouri, years ago. I followed him." Radar wagged his tail once. Arthur looked at Lena. "You're not a nurse." "No, sir. My name's Lena Brooks. Radar's my canine partner. We're investigating something." Arthur's eyes sharpened. "Let me guess. Charles Bennett?" Lena blinked. "You know him?" Arthur's lips twitched into a wry smile. "He's why I'm in this chair." Arthur's story came slowly, but it chilled Lena to the bone. He was a former hospital systems auditor, brought in 2 years ago to review patient billing anomalies at Memorial Hope. He started noticing strange surgical notations and procedural orders under Dr. Bennett's name, especially involving patients without families. "I tried raising flags," Arthur said, "but the higher-ups shut it down, said I was overstepping. A week later, I had a stroke on hospital grounds. No warning signs. Perfect health up to that point." Lena narrowed her eyes. "You think it was him?" Arthur's eyes met hers. "I know it. I just can't prove it. What was he trying to hide? I believe he was forging patient records, hiding where organs were going. I was getting close, so he poisoned me or injected something. I blacked out before I could submit my report. Lena felt fury rise in her chest. Radar lay protectively at Arthur's feet. You were going to be his next cover-up. Probably, Arthur said. But something went wrong. I didn't die, just lost movement and speech. Took me months to get most of it back. Lena put a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone anymore. That night, Lena couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was fire. She laid out the case like a map on her dining room table. Carradine's testimony, Jane Doe's unexplained missing kidneys, Arthur Callahan's suppressed audit, security footage, disguised identities. Lucas Darnell wasn't just a fugitive. He was a predator, and he was still out there. The question now wasn't what he had done. It was who was protecting him. And how high up did it go? The next morning, Lena sat across from hospital director Evelyn Monroe, a woman known for her crisp suits and colder reputation. I'm asking you to cooperate, Lena said, and to come clean about anything you've been asked to bury. Evelyn's face didn't move. I run a hospital, Officer Brooks, not a conspiracy ring. Then explain why there is no death certificate on file for Jane Doe 1172, and why your auditor suffered a life-altering stroke days before blowing the whistle. You're reaching. Lena slid a folder across the table. Inside were the files, the photos, the truth. Evelyn didn't open it, but her hand trembled. You're going to want to talk, Lena said, before this gets bigger. Radar sat beside her, silent but watchful. And in that moment, something changed in Evelyn's eyes. Fear, not of the truth, but of the fact it was already too late to stop it. It took 15 full seconds for Evelyn Monroe to say anything. She sat frozen in her leather chair, the folder untouched in front of her. Her manicured fingers rested against the edge, trembling just enough to betray the steel-cold expression she wore like armor. Across from her, Lena Brooks waited, calm, patient. Radar lay at her feet, head up, golden eyes alert. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply stared at Evelyn like he was waiting for her to break. Finally, she spoke. How long have you known? Her voice was quieter now. Less like a hospital director, more like someone who had just remembered they were human. Long enough, Lena said. Long enough to know Lucas Darnell used this hospital to hide, experiment, and harvest tissue under a false identity. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. I didn't know his real name, I swear to God. Then what did you know? Evelyn reached for a bottle of water on her desk but didn't drink. She stared at it like it held the courage she didn't have. I started getting calls 3 years ago, she finally said. Blocked numbers, anonymous donors, promises of endowments for new wings, new labs, equipment. If we look the other way on certain staff hiring records. Bennett? He came highly recommended through a private channel. His credentials were fabricated, I see that now. But at the time, they looked airtight. Yale, Johns Hopkins, a clean license number. You never ran a full background. I did, Evelyn said, but only on paper. I trusted the board's vetting process. Lena narrowed her eyes. Who signed off on his hiring? Evelyn hesitated. Lena stood leaning across the desk. Who signed it, Evelyn? Dr. Weissman. Dr. Robert Weissman, head of cardiology, the kind of man who played golf with state senators, ran community outreach programs, and gave TED Talks about ethical medicine, a walking billboard for institutional trust. Lena had known him in passing. He once offered her free orthopedic consults for Radar when the dog had torn a ligament. Now that image of the warm, benevolent doctor turned into something colder, something calculated. Where is Weissman now? Lena asked. He's on a sabbatical, Evelyn said. Europe, Paris, I think. Of course he is, Lena thought. She turned to leave. Wait, Evelyn said. There's something else. Lena stopped. There's a room, Evelyn said. One I never authorized. Darnell had it built through some maintenance back channel. Supposedly a record storage unit. No patients allowed. Staff weren't permitted inside. Only he had the key. Where is it? Southwest corridor. Old research wing. Sublevel B. Lena felt the hairs rise on the back of her neck. That area of the hospital had been shut down for nearly a decade after a funding freeze canceled an experimental therapy lab. She looked at Radar. We're going. The southwest corridor was colder than the rest of the hospital. The floors were older tile, the walls lined with peeling safety posters and outdated electrical panels. There were no patients here, no nurses, just the echo of footsteps and the low hum of humming fluorescent lights. Lena held her flashlight high as she passed each door. Radar led the way, his body tense but focused. Halfway down the hall, he stopped. Then he growled. The door ahead was unmarked. No room number. Just a simple metal handle in a modern biometric pad, completely out of place with the rest of the outdated wing. "This must be it," Lena whispered. She tried the handle. Locked. She examined the biometric panel. It had a fingerprint scanner and a key code input. "Radar," she murmured, kneeling beside him. "You sure?" Radar sniffed the bottom of the door. Then with a sharp bark, he sat down just like he did every time he found something he couldn't access but knew was wrong. Lena stood and called Frank Delaney. "We found it," she said. "The room. The one Darnell used." "Sit tight," Frank replied. "I'm bringing a warrant and a federal tech team. Don't go in." "Understood." But something in Lena twisted. They couldn't wait. What if someone was in there? Frank and the FBI arrived 2 hours later. When they finally breached the door, the room smelled like bleached metal and faintly rotting antiseptic. Inside was a fully functional, unauthorized surgical suite. A single operating table. Clean, cold, fluorescent lighting overhead. Cabinets filled with labeled vials, anesthesia-sterilized scalpels, and blood storage bags marked by blood type AB negative O plus B. In the corner stood a refrigeration unit. Inside, tissue samples, some tagged with dates going back 5 years. Frank stood in stunned silence. "Jesus Christ. Who did he do this to?" Lena asked softly. The forensic team started cataloging items, but Radar ignored the activity. He went straight to the back of the room where a metal panel in the wall sat slightly ajar. He pawed at it. Lena joined him, pulling it open. Behind the wall, a narrow crawl space. Radar didn't hesitate. He disappeared into the dark. "Radar," Lena called. From within came a bark. Frank grabbed a flashlight and climbed in after her. They followed the tight tunnel for 20 feet. Then it opened into a secret room, no lights, no power. Inside were 3 hospital beds, all empty, but the bedding wasn't cold. "Someone's been here," Lena whispered. Radar stood at one of the beds, sniffing a bloody sheet. Back upstairs, Lena and Frank reviewed the surveillance footage from outside the old wing. 2 nights before Carradine went missing, someone entered through the side delivery access. They never returned. The camera caught only a back profile, but the gait, the posture, it was Darnell. He had been using the hidden surgical suite for years, possibly experimenting on patients who couldn't fight back or weren't missed, and someone in the hospital, maybe more than one person, had helped cover it up. Lena sat down in the break room exhausted. Her hands trembled as she held her coffee. It was barely warm now. Radar nudged her hand. She looked at him. How many more people did he hurt right under our noses? Radar didn't answer, but his steady gaze told her the work wasn't over. The next day, Lena returned to see Arthur Callahan in his room. She told him everything. He closed his eyes. "So I was right, all along." "You were," she said. "But now we have enough to take him down, even if he runs." Arthur smiled faintly. "And you'll catch him." Lena looked at Radar. "We'll try." Arthur reached for her hand. "Thank you for listening. I should be thanking you. You nearly gave your life for this truth." Arthur squeezed her hand once, then let it go. As Lena stood to leave, Arthur added something quietly. "There's a notebook hidden in my wheelchair cushion. I kept notes after I started speaking again. Everything I remembered." Lena turned stunned. "You what?" "I knew someone would believe me someday." Back in her car, Lena flipped open the notebook. Names, dates, case numbers. One entry stood out. Patient Case Stewart scheduled for private evaluation under Dr. Bennett, never discharged. Lena pulled up the hospital database. No patient by that name. Then she checked an archived record from 2 years ago listed under transient ER admission. No ID. Age 24. Gender female, blood type AB negative. Lena's hands tightened around the steering wheel. Another girl. Gone. And no one ever looking for her. Until now. That night, Lena stared at her evidence board. Faces, names, documents, lies. The full picture was almost complete, but one piece was still out there. Lucas Darnell. He had slipped away once again, but Lena could feel it. He was circling back. He wouldn't leave this unfinished, and neither would she. Radar sat by her door, ears perked, tail still, waiting, watching, just like he always did until the truth finally showed its face. The letter came in an unmarked envelope. No return address, no stamps, just a single folded page left on Lena Brooks's windshield in the hospital parking lot. She found it just after sundown, Radar hopping into the back seat as usual. When she opened the driver's side door and spotted it tucked under the wiper, her stomach dropped. She unfolded it with shaking hands. No greeting, just 5 typed lines in cold-centered font. "You should have left it alone. Some things are above your badge. Arthur was a mistake. I won't repeat it. You still have time to walk away, but if you don't, I'll see you soon." There was no signature, but Lena knew exactly who had written it. Lucas Darnell was watching her. Back at home, Lena turned off every light, locked the doors, and checked the windows twice. Radar paced the living room, agitated. He could sense it too, something in the air, a shift. The calm before something cruel. She sat at her kitchen table, the letter in front of her lit only by a small lamp. Her Glock rested beside her elbow, unloaded but ready. She'd dealt with violent men before. Stalkers, killers, people who lied with every breath. But Darnell was something else. He wasn't just running from justice. He believed he was untouchable. And the fact that he had delivered a threat without being seen on her car no less proved it. He was hunting her now. Not just hiding, hunting. She called Frank Delaney. He picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you're calling to say you finally took a day off." "I got a message." Lena read him the contents of the letter. There was a long pause. "He's taunting you," Frank said, "trying to throw you off balance. It's working." "No, it's not. You've already gone farther than anyone else. You cracked his den wide open." "Which means he's desperate," she said, "and that makes him dangerous. I'll get eyes on your place tonight. You're not alone." "I've got radar," Lena said. There was a small chuckle on the other end. "Right. Best partner in the county." The next morning, Lena returned to the hospital with radar by her side. She wasn't technically assigned to the investigation anymore. FBI had stepped in after they raided Darnell's secret operating room, but she couldn't let it go. And after the letter, she had no intention of waiting on a formal invitation. She met Nurse Deborah King in a side hallway near the abandoned South Wing. They spoke in whispers. "You sure you want to be here?" Deborah asked. "I'm not stepping away now." "There's something I didn't tell you," Deborah said. "Something I wasn't ready to admit before." Lena's pulse kicked. 2 years ago, I got an anonymous tip to keep my hands off Dr. Bennett's transfers. It came in a plain envelope. No return. Just a note inside that said, "He's doing what others won't. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that." "Did you report it?" "I didn't know who to trust," Deborah said. "Back then, everyone thought he was some kind of saint. Patients loved him. Staff adored him. I figured maybe I misread it." "You didn't. I know that now." Lena looked down at Radar, who was staring at a nearby hallway. His nose lifted, nostrils twitching. Then he took a single step forward. "What is it, boy?" Radar barked once softly. Lena followed him down the hall. Room 118, unedited, still marked storage. She tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside were boxes, paperwork, extra gloves, nothing unusual at first glance. But Radar pushed forward, sniffing near the back wall, pawing at the floor. There was a vent, slightly ajar, hidden by a rolling cart of linens. Lena knelt, moved the cart, and pulled the grate. Radar crawled through first. On the other side, they found it another hidden room. This one smaller than the last. More primitive. Cinder block walls. No surgical lights. No modern tools. Just a chair, a camera, and chains bolted to the floor. Lena's throat tightened. This wasn't just for harvesting organs. This room had been used for control, for intimidation, maybe for torture. Radar whimpered and looked back at her. His ears were low. The smell must have been overwhelming fear blood trauma. Lena took photos of everything. Then she called Frank. "We found another room," she said, "and this one wasn't for medicine." That night, she couldn't sleep again. But it wasn't the letter or the room. It was a name, Kay Stewart, the Jane Doe from Arthur Callahan's notebook. Lena had checked every system. There was no trace of her in the hospital's current database. No billing, no discharge, no next of kin. But Arthur's note had been clear: private evaluation under Bennett, never discharged. It meant she had been hidden, possibly taken, or worse. The following morning, Lena went back to Arthur's room. He was asleep, the morning sun warming the bedsheets. Radar walked up and laid his head gently on Arthur's leg. The old man stirred, opened his eyes. "Any luck?" he rasped. "I need to ask about Kay Stewart." Arthur blinked. "I barely remember. Young woman, brown hair, pretty. Came in on a Thursday. No ID, admitted under observation." "Was she conscious?" "Barely. I think she was sedated." "Was there a transfer order?" Arthur nodded slowly. "Internal. No external facility. I thought it was odd." Lena leaned forward. "Where would she have been taken?" Arthur thought for a long time. "There used to be a records room in the basement, one no one used anymore. Some of us called it the vault." "The vault." He nodded. "Thick door, no windows. You could scream your lungs out and no one would hear." Lena and Radar made their way down into the basement level, deeper than they'd gone before. The vault was real. A steel-reinforced door, rusted ancient, once used to house sensitive hospital records back when everything was on paper. It took Lena 15 minutes to pry it open with a crowbar. Inside, there was nothing but stale air and darkness. She turned on her flashlight. The beam revealed a mattress, a portable toilet, an IV stand, and in the far corner, a bracelet. Silver, engraved KS. Radar walked forward, sniffed the bracelet, and whined. Lena picked it up with gloved hands, heart thudding. He'd kept her here. For how long? And where was she now? She climbed back into her truck. An hour later, hands dirty, shirt damp with sweat. Radar sat in the passenger seat. She stared at the bracelet in her hand. It wasn't just evidence, it was a life, a name, a story that no one ever told. She started the engine, but just before shifting into drive, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice came through, soft, polished, cold. You just don't quit, do you? Her blood turned to ice. Darnell. He laughed low and measured. You're cleverer than I gave you credit for. The vault? Nice touch. Where is she? Lena snapped. Silence. Then some things are better left buried. Not for me. You really want to know, he asked. Then come find me. Click. The line went dead. Lena sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear. Then she looked at Radar. He was already standing. Ready. She whispered, let's end this. They found the cabin 2 counties over deep in the Tennessee woods. It wasn't listed on any map. No property records, no power lines. Just a faded gravel path and a makeshift wooden gate half buried under fallen pine needles. Lena Brooks sat behind the wheel of her truck, staring through the windshield as fog curled through the trees. Next to her, Radar stood alert ears, forward nose twitching. They had been driving since dawn, chasing GPS pings, triangulated cell data, and one barely legal lead from Frank Delaney that ended with a whispered warning. If you find him, don't wait. He's not the kind of man who surrenders. Now here they were at the end of the line. Lena stepped out of the truck slowly, boots crunching on dead leaves. Radar leapt down beside her shoulders, tense eyes scanning. The air was still. No bird song, no wind, just silence. She moved forward, one hand on her holstered weapon. The cabin looked like something out of a horror film, wood-rotted windows boarded. But the door was reinforced with fresh metal hinges. A camera blinked from the roofline. He knew they were coming. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Lena's flashlight beam cut across a narrow hallway leading into what looked like a surgical bay that had been built inside a living room. Steel table, IV stand, biohazard bins, freezer unit humming softly in the corner. And behind it all, Lucas Darnell. He was standing with his back turned, dressed in surgical scrubs, his graying hair tied back. Calm, almost casual. I was wondering how long it'd take you, he said, not turning around. Lena didn't lower her weapon. Step away from the table. He did, slowly raising his hands. No weapons, he said. Just my hands and a few regrets. Radar growled low and steady. I wouldn't get too close if I were you, Lena warned. Radar's faster than he looks. Darnell turned, smiling faintly. Beautiful animal. Still loyal to the law, I see. You don't get to talk about loyalty, Lena snapped. He shrugged. Depends on how you define it. She stepped forward. Where's Case Stewart? His face twitched just for a second. I gave her a chance, he said softly, but her body couldn't keep up. She was too weak. Lena's heart sank. You killed her. I saved her for a while, longer than anyone else would have. That's what I've always done. I help people in ways the system won't. Spare me the speech. She was the last one, Darnell whispered. I knew it had to stop. That's why I came here. To end it. Radar barked sharply. I don't believe you, Lena said. You were preparing another operation. We found your room, the chair, the chains. Darnell's smile faded. That wasn't about medicine, he said. That was control, power, the illusion of safety. That's what hospitals or, places where people let strangers cut them open and call it healing. Lena took another step. You're done. Maybe, he said. Then with sudden speed, he lunged toward the table, reaching under the tray. Lena fired. The gunshot echoed through the cabin like thunder. Darnell collapsed onto the floor, clutching his leg, blood spilling onto the hardwood. Radar ran to his side, but stopped inches short, teeth bared, growling. Lena approached, gun still raised. Darnell laughed through the pain. You couldn't let me die. No, she said, that's the easy way out. 2 hours later, Darnell was in custody. Life flight took him from the forest to a federal medical facility under armed guard. The FBI agents who arrived thanked Lena with firm handshakes and tight jaws. You just saved lives. We'll never even know we're in danger, one agent said. Lena nodded, but her thoughts were still back in the cabin on the cold table, the bracelet, and the unspoken names of every victim who never got a voice. Back in town, the hospital issued a formal apology. Evelyn Monroe resigned. Dr. Weissman was arrested at Charles de Gaulle Airport boarding a flight to Dubai. He didn't resist. A joint task force was formed to investigate internal cover-ups. Patient families came forward. Media vans circled the parking lot like vultures. But inside room 214, Arthur Callahan sat peacefully in his wheelchair, watching the sunlight dance through the blinds. Lena came to him personally. "It's over," she said. He smiled. "You found the truth." "We did," Lena said. "Because of you." "Because of him too," Arthur added, nodding toward Radar, who lay at his feet. Lena looked down. He never gave up, not once. 2 weeks later, Lena and Radar stood on a small stage in front of a packed town hall. Officials, reporters, families, and children filled the seats. The mayor handed her a certificate. The local police chief gave Radar a service medal, now gleaming on his collar. But Lena didn't make a speech. She just took the mic and said, "We don't always know who's walking among us. Sometimes evil wears a badge. Sometimes it wears a white coat. But dogs like Radar heroes like him, they don't care what someone looks like. They care about what's inside." The crowd stood and clapped. Radar wagged his tail once. That night, back at home, Lena sat on the porch swing, Radar curled beside her, the evening breeze gentle against her face. She looked up at the stars. "Think we'll ever stop chasing monsters?" she asked. Radar gave a soft huff. She smiled. "Yeah, me neither." Then she looked into the camera because their story didn't belong just to them anymore. It belonged to all of you. Thank you for watching this emotional and suspenseful journey on Heroes for Animals. If you've been moved by Radar's story, by the loyalty, bravery, and quiet determination of a dog who never let the truth stay buried, please consider subscribing for more true stories where animals make the difference between justice and silence. And tell us in the comments, do you believe animals can sense danger sometimes better than people can? Have you ever seen a pet react to something you couldn't explain? We'd love to hear your stories. Until next time, stay safe, trust your instincts, and don't ever ignore the dog when it growls.